Hi everyone, Anubhav here. I'm really excited about this demo because this takes me back a couple decades, and then obviously, Finding Nemo. I think almost everyone who's grown up in the early 2000s as a teenager and a young adult has watched that movie, certainly a child. And when I started building this template out, I realized there is so much that goes into building a story. And what I've done is I've taken the framework of a three-act structure. I did not build the three-act structure. Stories to me at one point of time was a beginning, middle, and end, but then there is more that got built out. And three-act structure has probably been used for at least a few centuries. I would say 700, 800 years, maybe even 1,000 years, started by Greeks and then eventually Romans, and then English mastered it. And now today it is used by 70% of the storytellers who are writing fiction stories and making movies as a very strong foundational structure. So let me drill in a little bit more into what this three-act structure looks like. A beginning, middle, and end. That's exactly what it really is. But there is so much more that really goes into it because just the beginning, middle, and end will not connect the dots to the emotional sentiments of a user to really get them excited to get to the end of the story. So, what is really built, and I'm going to take a quick presentation. It starts off with a beginning that is absolutely spot on, but then there is more. There has to be a hook, there has to be an inciting incident, there has to be a fire or something that really leads to the hero, if this is a hero led story, to move on and do figure out a little bit of his own self of what the life is going to be, and then starts a series of escalations, a series of conflicts, and these conflicts need to get escalated. That's part of the act two, which is confrontation. So quick details around that. And these confrontations end up into pretty heavy turmoil, leading into a disaster, a crisis of sort. And this is what builds into the climax eventually, and it leads to a situation where the audience is left wondering on what is it that will be at the end of this story. And that is a classic three-act structure. And now we get to the resolution, because every single time in a story there is a confrontation, it leads to a resolution. And that resolution now is, it starts off with a denouement before it ends through a descending action. And this is where you start tying in all of the loose ends of the story. This is where you start concluding your character arc, if there is one. Uh, Always recommend it to lead it with a character as well. And if anyone is interested a little bit more about what this structure can look like, there is a video as well that I've put in here.
Every
So you can essentially build your act, you can build your templates, which is out here as a three-act structure, and then you can go deeper into it through the drill down here, and that's where the details are. I did not stop there. What I did next was I built out the breakdown of Finding Nemo. So all of the acts of the three-act structure, from beginning to the climax, and then act two, the series of conflicts and escalating conflicts and disaster and crisis, each and every scene, all the way into the denouement and an end of the story. I have brought them all together here, and then brought in all the characters, that the two key protagonists, Nemo and Marlin, the father and son duo. They're both on their own from the very beginning to the end, except the very beginning and the very end, fighting their own battle. So brought in those two characters, and then there's there's story. So there's more that you can see here, and then they meet the sea turtle Crush at the ESC, and then additional details that keep happening, keep coming in. Darla, the antagonist, probably the only antagonist apart from the sharks in this movie, That is beautifully done. And then the locations, the different locations that really are part of this movie, the coral reef, where the scene begins, the movie begins, the deep ocean, the Australian current, the tank where Nemo is held in captivity, and then eventually the Sydney harbor when uh, Marlin and Dory eventually get to, uh, and how the story unfolds from an event standpoint. When Coral is gone, Nemo is taken, Marlin meets Dory, there's a shark scare, there's trust that gets built when eventually Dory starts jumping on the jellyfishes and she almost loses her life. And then eventually the big whale on their way to Sydney. Nemo's escape from the dentist, and then eventually Dory is captured. That's the denouement and the final events. And what are the big themes that really are in this movie? Letting go and trust that the movie starts off with overcoming fear. This is very Marlin centric, but there is a lot of it that is Nemo centric as well at the later part of the story. And then there's power of friendship, then there's a parent-child relationship, and eventually how it all comes together. So this is an amazing way to build your entire story structure together on Voctales by using the different building blocks that are available to a user. And then once you have this plot, once you have this outline, you start building it out. This is best done by people who are mostly plotters and planters versus people who just start writing. And nothing against them, but I think this is the best way to build anything and following a template and a structure. That's a wrap. Hope you enjoy writing and happy storytelling.